Well, all right. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. My name is Jason Levine, and it's great to have you back here on the Masterclass. It's been a while. It really feels like it's been a while, actually, and so glad to be back. And today we're going to be talking about, this is probably going to be a multi-part Masterclass because, well, the theme is mixing for surround. But if you ever tried to mix for surround, you know that you really can't learn everything about the process of doing it in, 57 minutes. So what I thought I would do is kind of break down some of the real basics of kind of getting started with surround, some basic tips around adjustments between dialogue, music, and sound design or sound effects, and then some basic mixing, and then how you export it, whether you're exporting directly from something like Audition or maybe going back into Premiere using either stems, so discrete mono stems that you would use in a 5.1 encoder. So you'd have a discrete, left front, right front, center sub, left surround, right surround, or using something like an interleaved file, which would be one self-contained multi-channel file that can pass through directly to Premiere Pro, and then again can also subsequently be used if you're using an external encoder to do things like DTS encoding or Dolby or whatever. All right. So as always, coming to you from the desert here in Arizona. I see you've got lots of people tuning in from all over. Hello, Mallory, Umacorn, Alliance, Jurgen, Wade, Mayen. Nice to see you. Gross Mask, Chris Olson, Rick. Hey, what's up? And coming to us over on the Periscopes. I see we've got Desiree. How's it going? All right. So let's see. What is Mallory saying there? I hope you will show how to make dialogue louder and music lower and vice versa, so I can do this on a video with music and voiceover. Yes. Now, the techniques for doing that in a surround environment are basically the same, and you can use the auto ducking process, and I can set that up and show that to you. Most of the time when I'm doing mixing in a surround environment, it's usually done manually by me, what's known as riding the fader. So really just listening and making adjustments as I go, but I will indeed showcase that to you. All right, so without further ado, why don't we go ahead and get started? We're going to switch things over here. Let me switch over my screen. Looks like everything is rocking, okay? And let's do that. Okay, thank you. So, for today's content, I have dipped back into, it's now one of my favorites. I mentioned on stream over the last couple of months that my youngest son, during this pandemic, got into video editing, and I started letting him edit gameplay videos and plushie videos and all these other kinds of things that he was just shooting with the phone. So this was one that we showcased months ago. He did a little plushie video, Sonic and Tails, Quest for the Chaos Emerald. And what I was really just showcasing here was, so this originated as a stereo mixed output. So something that I get asked all the time with regard to Premiere is, okay, so I did my mix or I did my finished edit and it's in stereo. How do I just kind of turn this into 5.1, or can I just kind of remix the stereo in 5.1? And the short answer is, well, yes, but you have to create a new sequence for that. And the reason is, while you can go into your sequence settings, all right, and we can do this for things like changing the frame size, the resolution, and you can always make those changes here, you will note that when you choose the audio track master, and by that I mean the master fader containing, mono, 2 channels, or X number of export or output channels, this cannot be changed after the fact. So you'd have to make a new sequence, but then it's fairly easy, and that's actually what I did here. So a couple of ways, of course, to do that. Easiest way is to come down to the new item icon here. All right, go into new sequence, okay, and then choose the appropriate frame size. This was actually a 4K project, but I usually kind of start with the DSLR presets. Go into settings. Again, I would adjust the frame size here. So in this case, it's UHD 3840 2160. It was actually a straight 30 frames. We ever going to be out of drop frame time code stuff? Probably never. I don't know. It's funny, now that I'm hearing so much more about sort of the next generation, and because of gaming actually, and the appreciation for HFR, just higher frame rates, yeah, that very well may go away. It's time. It's time to go away, frankly. All the years that we used to work so much in Europe, I always used to say 25 FPS makes complete sense. 24 makes sense. 23976 $29.97. This is, this is just not. So you would do this, but the key is you go into tracks when you're making your new sequence here, and you're going to change this master to 5.1. Not multi-channel, 5.1. And just to be really clear again, many of you I know are familiar with Premiere, so you might be intimately aware of this anyway, but Premiere only supports 5.1 mixing. We don't do 7.1, we don't do 10.2, we don't do Atmos, 5.1. So if you want to create a surround mix in Premiere, you're limited to 5.1. Now, I say limited, it's not really a limit. I get asked all the time, what do you think about 7.1? What do you think about all these, super multi-channel 24 speaker things? And what do I think of them? I don't. 5.1's great. And really, what I'm going to show you today is that for me, and it kind of speaks to the whole Avatar 3D thing, giving Avatar a little credit. But, when Avatar happened, it was kind of this new 3D concept, right? It wasn't creatures jumping out at you. There's the moments of maybe some of that. But it was more that you were kind of truly immersed in the experience, in the environment. Well, that's the kind of 5.1 that I really enjoy, where you're just kind of in it. It's not that you have tons of discrete motion and movement. Frankly, that stuff gets tiring. And if you watched, 3 movies back to back where everything was constantly pinging diagonally across your head, I mean, sure, many may like that. I don't. It makes me very nauseous, and it's just unnecessary. And sound doesn't really work that way anyway, So I like more of an immersive rather than a kind of environment. Doesn't really matter here. In this case, 5.1 is what you want, and you can then choose your track types. Now, if you're going to be working with something like an interleaved file, which is what I talked about at the beginning, and you don't have to make your standard track types this, you would use an adaptive track. Or you could also use you would use a 5.1 track if you're going to have an interleaved 5.1 file. Adaptive you would only use if you have other flavors of multi-channel, 4-channel, 6-channel, 8-channel. But 5.1 is what you would want here, because this is going to give you the 5.1 surround panner. Now again, we're going to do most of the work today in Audition because, quite frankly, the 5.1 mixing experience is better. And because you have dynamic link between Premiere Pro and Audition, it makes it very easy to do your mix send everything, send all the media, your edit, everything over to Audition, do your mix, and then send it back. And that's effectively what we're doing. But when you create the 5.1 sequence, what you get on each track is you get this multi-channel panner, this surround panner. And this is going to let you, again, using this little, I had a colleague used to call this the puck and dish. I don't even know what we call this in Premiere anymore. It's a surround panner. Lets you move things, again, center, left, right, left surround, right surround. And then you have your center dialog control here and your LFE volume here, all right? Now, the only issue is that when you're doing surround in Premiere, you're working in that little teeny tiny window. It's just so small, and this is a 10-track audio session, so I could do it. It's also only 2.5 minutes. If you're doing something pretty major, it's just a very small environment to do it in. Now, you have fully editable keyframes. There's lots of flexibility, but that's where it starts. You could do the whole thing with keyframes down in the track headers here. You don't have to do any of it with that surround panner. But again, it gets a little difficult to really visualize and make things do what you want. So we're going to work primarily over on the Audition side, all right? Orlando Rivera, there's auto ducking? Yes, there is. Yes, there is indeed. And you can find it under the Essential Sound panel, which we will get to momentarily in Audition, all right? But it's in both Audition and Premiere. Elevation, all those other technologies are marketing gimmicks. I mean, look, I'm not gonna slam it all, but I already said I'm not a huge fan. And when you consider consider the modern movie theater, if anyone remembers them, and they may not be around much longer, I hope they are, but who knows what's going to happen now. I guess we'll see what happens with the Wonder Woman release on HBO Max. And I just saw some other company, who was it? I don't remember if it was not Warner Brothers. Somebody said all their 2021 movies are going to theater and HBO Max. So HBO Max is now going to be this like crazy destination for new movies, and who knows what's going to happen. But what I was getting at was, in a theater, you know, where you have all these stacked speakers. I mean, I went to an Atmos theater once, and I didn't get any more sense of discrete placement just because it was in 10.2 or 12.4 or whatever. Not at all. It was just loud. Just loud, you know? And the above speakers, broadcasting from above your head, really dumb. That's not, you don't hear sound like that. It was rain. Rain coming above my head, except you hear rain when it hits the ground and reflects back up. Anyway, that's a social comment. File new multitrack session is what you're going to want to do to build your 5.1 session in Audition. Again, defaults to stereo, just choose 5.1. When you do that, just like Premiere, what it's going to give you is this surround pattern. Now you might be thinking, well, that looks even smaller. True. However, when you double click on it, it now gives you this. And let me go ahead and undock this for a second here. So this is the Audition surround panner. And, you know, first of all, right away, just visually, it's allowing you to see how much signal is going to each speaker, right? Whether it's center, left, right, and again, the surrounds. You just have, it's definitely graphically more beautiful. I love this UI. They did such a nice job. You can see it's also really fluid and easy to manipulate that orb in real time. You can, of course, automate this. I'll show you that when we get there a little bit later. But you have, again, individual controls to enable or disable certain speakers for that track. So I don't want any audio going to my left surround and right surround. I can just disable those. No audio will go there, you know. You'll see down below you have your radius here, which was showing you kind of the angular movement there. Separate level control for center, which defaults to 100%. That should really be changed. And separate control for LFE, which stands for low frequency effects, or the equivalent of your sub, right? Your subwoofer information. Okay. It is Warner Brothers. Oh, okay, yeah. Interesting. Mallory, I'm fine never going to another movie theater again. You know what? I'm not going to lie to you. Today marks my 9th month. It's my 9-month anniversary of being locked down. March 4th was when I started this. Yeah, I'm okay with it now. It's trouble enough for me now to leave my house. Yeah, I know. It's weird, right? It's a weird feeling. Woohoo! Theater, says Wade. Exactly, right. Okay, so once you create the surround, the 5.1 session, now at this point, it's really just about figuring out what you want to do, where you want to go, and again, how you want to set things up. So let's start there. So I'm going to go into the mixer here real briefly. Now, for the purpose of the stream, 5.1 is impossible to stream out to you because it's YouTube, Behance, none of these networks are broadcasting in 5.1. So, but one of the things I typically do anyway, now you can see, or you may have seen behind me, you can't really see it in this shot, this studio is wired for 5.1, so I have speakers behind me, I have a center speaker up here, got my sub down here. When I'm mixing in 5.1, it's wonderful. However, a lot of times I like to always just have a mix kind of being summed down to stereo. So one of the first things I do is I create a bus. I create a bus and I create a stereo, basically a stereo submix of everything that's happening in this 5.1 environment. So that way I can always hear it in the front center speakers without the need to have everything else on. This also helps us in terms of the stream. So whatever tweaks we make and we place things discreetly in the rear, you're still going to get to hear what I'm doing, okay? And I simply did that by going to one of my track sends, all right? Or my effects sends, I should say. Click over here, add bus, stereo, okay? And then I titled it stereo mix. And then you can see here, I'm sending each one of these audio tracks to this stereo mix bus, okay? Now, in talking about ambience and effects, all right, again, I'm going to kind of combine things and move along fairly quickly with a lot of this. So that's a way to hear stereo so we can always hear everything that I'm doing, even if I'm putting something in the center speaker is not going to translate over the stream. It will now because it's also going to the stereo mix, okay. Effects. Reverb, ambience. Like I said, I think one of the most effective ways, and you see this when it's really well done, you know, like concerts, right? If you ever watched a really good, I remember there's like a Pink Floyd DVD from probably a decade ago or more. Saw it at my buddy's house. It's a 5-1 mix. Of course, the band is in front of you. So again, for me, for the viewer, and these are the kinds of things you have to consider. What do I care? Why is the guitar in the back rear? The guitarist is up there. You know, I've seen remixes where you're watching a video and the stuff is like all over the place. It just feels weird. And it feels imbalanced because that's not how your brain is seeing it there, but it's back here. It doesn't quite work. This Pink Floyd one was very big. It was very wide. So they really took advantage of width, and they took advantage of center as well. Okay, center's great. And sub. But the rear was all about careful reflections and effects and ambience and crowd noise. And that's what really made you feel like you were at the concert, right? I don't need to hear money. Like maybe that, if that's ping-ponging diagonally across my head, okay, that was kind of cool. I think that was the one exception. I think they did. They had the sound effects of money, the cash register stuff going in like massive movement. That was cool. But all the music, everything else was up front. But it was this ambience and reverb and delay and crowd that was in the back that really sold it. So to create that essence, you can create a reverb bus, okay? And in this case, I'm making a 5.1 reverb bus, okay? But I'm sending this as well to the stereo mix. So you're still gonna be able to hear me placing effects in the rear, but they're also gonna go out in stereo. So the nice thing about having reverb on its own track, usually pre-fader, okay? And I'm not gonna go into all of these things because we've talked about these in other master classes, but you can ask if you have a question. The signal is going before it hits the fader. This tells us it's pre-fader. These are all post-fader. That gives us total control of the amount of reverb, you know, how much is playing out. Also, I added our standard studio reverb here. I started with a Hall preset. It's about a 6-second decay. High frequency cutoff is around 6,000 hertz. So it's gonna be a bit of brightness, not super bright, right? But a little bit of brightness there. A little nice, it's kind of in that sibilance range. But again, it's more just about brighter ambience. And notice the balance here, 0% dry and 100% wet, okay? So that's the key also with using pre-fader. I don't want any dry signal reflected on this echoey reverb in the rear speakers. I want it to be echoey and ambient. So no dry signal, only the reverberated signal. The dry signal is going to be up front, right? And it may also bleed a little into the rear, and it may bleed a little into the center, and you may have some of it in the LFE if it's suitable, you know. Got to be careful with LFE. We'll talk a bit more about that shortly. Key is reverb is also going to the stereo mix, all right? Very easily, all right? You can see I'm sending it here to the stereo mix, and you're controlling how much of that's going to the stereo mix. And again, we're just going to use it to create some space and ambience behind us, okay? You can still do all the crazy moves. I'm going to show you that, but just think about it, you know? And think about that most people may not be experiencing it in 5.1. So a lot of it gets lost. Really, the best 5.1 mixes of stereo things that I've ever heard are where you just feel like you're sitting in the room. You know, it's impressive when you hear like discrete sounds in, you know, behind your head for like 2 minutes. And then it's like, okay, I get it, right? It's like you're showing off. Okay, I get it. Because our brain doesn't really want that happening all the time, all right? Maybe you love that, and great, awesome. But you have to think about the viewer and listener too, all right? Very cool. Okay. Can you bus between channels? Yes, I mean, that's effectively what we're doing here. So we're sending one bus, in this case, this reverb bus, which is going out to the master, to our 5.1 master. We're sending that bus to another bus. So yes, we're busing to another bus. You can absolutely do that, all right? All right. This is like that Deezer 360 thing I have on the Sony XM4000. Is that what this sound is called? I don't know which sound you're referring to. XM4. I'm not sure, but it could be. It could absolutely be, okay? All right, so once we have this in here, couple things we want to, first of all consider, all right? And maybe we'll actually start with a bit of that ducking and then we'll get into the individual surround tweaking. Dialogue and things, okay? And I'm going to put headphones on for this. So one of the things that I'll typically do is I'll start to go through and really just individually start to place things where I want them to be. And I might even move some of these tracks around because they're not all kind of in the order I would like, all right? So I might take something like, this ADR comp track. Let's solo this. Actually, this and the Tails track. And this is just dialogue.
Nothing like a nice day in Green Hills, huh, Tails? Yeah, nothing like a nice day. Who's that guy over there?
Okay. So again, if we click on our little surround panner, I'm going to go ahead and dock this back over here. Now, because it's dialogue, and because I want to discreetly place that dialogue, all right, I'm going to say for this, for both of these actually, that I want them in the center, all right? And I can control that center amount, again, with this slider right here. Now it's currently just locked in the center, so I don't necessarily need to turn these off. I still can if I want to, all right? But the key is this is all going into the center, all right? Now, again, I might start to go through and do this for each of them, each of my dialogue tracks here, all right? And just make sure that's at 100, which it defaults to anyway.
Nothing like a nice day in Green Hills, huh, Tails? Yeah, nothing like a nice day.
Now, if you look at the meters down here, it may be a little deceptive because the third meter down is the dialogue track. Here, I'm just gonna, is the center track.
This chaos emerald is mine, and you're gonna have to fight me for it if you want it. You hear me?
Okay.
Do ya?
Now, the reason why you're still seeing the front, left, and right moving is because, remember, I'm sending that to a bus, which is also going to the 5.1 output. So I don't want you to think it's doing something wrong. It's because I have it summing in stereo so that you can all hear this discrete placement, okay? But the key is, I first start doing that. Kind of get a relative placement so that you can kind of get an idea of where things are supposed to be. This original dialogue one, this is the same too. All right, take this out of there. Yeah, I can see I've got some stuff going into the rear. I don't want any dialogue in the rear speakers whatsoever, all right? We can solo this too. This is live Foley as opposed to the overdubbed sound effects, okay? So all of these things
so heavy.
are now going where we want them to go, all right? Cool. Now, again, we don't have to do that. It's entirely up to you. But what you're going to start to do is you're going to start to carve out spaces where you want things to be. Now, similarly, if we were to go to something like our music tracks, I've got two different music tracks here. They're not playing all the time, and they're fairly low amplitude. Let's start with this one here. All right. So first thing is, we want to take that out of the center. Okay. So we don't want any signal of this going to the center at all. And we're going to do the same thing here. Again, for discrete placement purposes. Now, again, I've got some other routing things in here which might be falsely sending some of that there because of how I have this routed for the stream. But I'm just showing you, if you pull it out of the center, just pull that slider all the way down, none of that music's going to be going to the center. It defaults to going to the center. I don't know why, but you don't want it there. Because again, you're going to keep that discrete for dialogue, okay? Now, once you have all that happening, you can then also decide where else do you want this music to go? Now, again, I've got some of it here. I've got it going into my rear speakers. Maybe I want a little bit of that music in the rear speakers. Kind of, again, dry, but just a little bit bleeding back there to give me a little bit more ambience. Okay? So now as we look at our levels here, healthy amount in our rear speakers, okay? Just depends on how much you want, what it is that you're trying to do, what it is that you're trying to go for, okay? And then for the sound effects and things, these are all going to be, well, probably one by one. In other words, if I'm trying to create something that's super wide and super accurate against picture, you know, most of these sound effects are mono. So typically you can have your sound design, if it's things like punches, they don't necessarily need to be in stereo, but if you have, I think there's one shot. Let me see if I did pan it. Yeah, maybe this one right here, this bass drop. Yeah, so there's just a slowed down sound effect in here. Let me see if I can find which one it is. Yeah, so this was like a slowed down whoosh that I already panned in stereo. And if you look real carefully on the meters down here, you'll see that it's kind of doing this little. All right, and if you're listening in stereo, you can hear it as well. So again, the punches, do I want them back there? I don't. Maybe you do. That's entirely up to you. Now, if you want to start automating and moving those things around and actually getting kind of creative, let's see if there's anything interesting here. All right, somewhere I've got like a helicopter sound effect. No, that's a crash. I think it's here. All right. Now, again, for this scene, Tails in this case is somehow flying, and we used a helicopter sound. This was the genius of my 8-year-old here. If we wanted to automate that, if we wanted to have that move around in 5/1 space, I can change my automation mode from read to write, okay? And in doing that, it's now going to allow us to automate the position of this in surround, okay? So let's wind back a little bit and let's start playback, and then I'll start grabbing that little, I always call it the orb, our center orb, and kind of moving things around. And maybe we'll have it start over here. Not my most brilliant work, but that's okay. All right, so now what you'll see is if I go to pan, angle, and radius under my show envelopes command here, this is now showing you the keyframes of the movement that I just made, and it goes back into touch mode. And if I wind back through this and play again, you'll see it's automated. I didn't actually realize that it was just like a sharp cutoff. I should put a little fade out on that. Okay, so we've automated our changes. And if I say wanted to redo that whole thing again, let's just go back into play mode. Now with touch, what it means is when I grab that orb, it'll begin the overwrite process. And then when I let go, it'll go back to whatever the last state the automation was in. All right, so let's do this. Let's redo it now. And I'm going to grab it right away. Okay. Now again, if you were listening in this room right now, you'd hear that this just kind of circled around me and ended up behind me. Okay, it's a helicopter. Kind of legit if you want that kind of thing. All right, and again, just to go show you here, play it back. There you go. Okay, sweet. I see Reverb Mike is talking about the free audition sound effects. Yes, they're awesome. Many of those things I created years and years ago. There's over 10,000 of them there. Thank you for posting that link. Absolutely worth going. In fact, a lot of these sounds are from that. Most of the punches I had to create myself, but most of those sound effects are from there. Anthony Villa, what's up? Daniel Londono, yes. It's a really nice surround panner. Very cool. It has worked to use the NX from Waves or Facebook Spatial Workstation to downmix 5.1 to binaural stereo. Yeah, you can do that too. And again, now binaural, a little bit different. And I've talked about this a lot. And if you watch, I have a couple of streams where I'm showcasing ambisonic audio, which ultimately, when you work with ambisonics, what you export out of Premiere is creating a binaural soundtrack. That's what it's doing. And for those of you unfamiliar, that is a true spatial type audio where, you know, it's very positional, but you're literally hearing things in a circular way. So as you turn your head, perspectives of things change. If you've seen any or watched any of those on YouTube, or if you're using like an Oculus. The translations from 5.1 to binaural for me tend to leave me a little meh, because I don't also love binaural either, except for like experimentation, When binaural was really kind of hip quite 20 years ago, I used to do a ton of binaural recording and mixing, and it's fun to do like, if you like ASMR, you should get into binaural recording, because that's the ultimate, hearing like people snip scissors or cut a piece of hair from behind with headphones on, listening to a binaural recording. Ooh, it'll send chills up your spine. But yes, the Waves one is great. Really, really cool stuff. All right. Good to see you too, Mustafa. All right, thank you. Okay, so that's a little bit of automated panning. And again, you can do this for anything, all right? And then you always have editable keyframes. Now, talking about this, again, if I were to come down here, we were just automating, in this case, the radius and the angle, okay? As I adjust these parameters here, if you're taking a look, as I'm adjusting this keyframe and it's showing you the percentage here, and again, if you hover over them, it'll give you that. Let me zoom in so you can see it better. It's going to give you the change in percentage. You're also seeing it happen in the panner. So you're seeing it adjust that radius just like that, okay? If I were to click on the angle here, now you're seeing it adjust the angle. So this is why I was saying you could draw all of the automation for these parameters if you so desired, okay? It's really nice to be able to automate them right here. Now, just as with Audition, it's the same. If I wanted to record movement here, I go into write mode, I start playback, all right? I don't think there's even anything on this track, but if I just start moving this thing around, oh please, Premiere, don't die on me. What just happened? Oh, no, what? Come on, man. Yeah. Happens, yo. It's the same process. You're just going to have to believe me. We'll come back to Premiere after. So you could do it the same way, but here it's just so much easier, and it's easier to do visually. And then again, you can undock the panner. It just makes life so much better. And I love kind of working that way. What's up, Ale, JSJVD, Line World, Carlos, Slash, Sorcery, how are you doing? Johan Lindgren, nice to see you. Okay, so again, we don't need to spend too much time on the automation. You kind of get the idea there. But let's talk about some of the ambience and reverb. Actually, no, we're going to do ducking first. Okay, so let's talk about ducking. Now, you could do this. If I'm doing this in a proper 5.1 environment, I would probably use what's known as sidechain ducking, which you can do in Audition. I just did a stream on this not long ago. It's pretty complex. There's an easier way. So if you're still watching, I can't remember who asked for that earlier, here's how you do it. So we're going to go into the Essential Sound panel, okay? And the Essential Sound panel was designed to allow non-audio pros a really easy way to mix with really good sounding, largely AI-driven results, okay? It just does a really phenomenal job. And one of the elements that we added in Essential Sound is the ability to automatically detect and lower music against dialogue tracks, okay? So the first thing you're going to do is that you need to tell the Essential Sound, you need to tag your media. So to do that, I'm going to come in here and choose my 3 dialogue tracks, although I think this original dialogue might have some, sound design on it just by accident, but that's okay. And I'm going to tag it as dialogue, okay? Now, just real quickly, when you do that, what it then gives you is a whole series of effects and filters and processes like noise reduction, rumble reduction, humming, de-essing, adding, reducing room ambience and reverb, adding dynamic compression, EQ, and then even adding some spatial effects like large reflective rooms and such. It's going to give you all the common things that you would use to process dialogue. We're not going to use any of that for now, but the key is we've now tagged all of our dialogue as dialogue. Cool. Let's now go down to music, okay? And we're going to select these, and I'm going to tag these as music, okay? And once again, it then presents you with a whole bunch of things that you would normally use to process music in a mix. The key that we're talking to, is ducking, okay? So when you enable ducking, what happens is it's going to analyze, you see it's doing its analysis right there. It's analyzing the dialogue, and then it's creating keyframes to automatically drop the level of the music wherever there is dialogue present. Okay? Super cool. Now these are sound effects. Let me shrink these all up. Kind of get these out of the way. Get us a little bit closer. Okay, to our dialogue. I could also move all the dialogue tracks, I realize that. In fact, here, let's just move these up so you can see it a little bit better. Okay? So wherever there's talking, you can see that it's automatically keyframing and adjusting what's happening. Okay? Now, there are 3 basic parameters here. Sensitivity, which is this is your threshold, how quickly it detects dialogue and then begins the process of ducking. The duck amount, in this case, is like 18 dB. Now, this is a common question I always get. What should be the difference between, dialogue and music? Well, there's no absolute there because it changes, right? Sometimes you want, if you're going to be, if it's an action scene, the music is usually pretty loud and the dialogue is pretty loud. So while there's a slight difference, a lot of that is controlled via EQ. And some of it's done via amplitude. In general, anywhere from 10 to 14 dB, if it's kind of background music, is usually just a starting point of where you want your dialogue and music to be. At a minimum, the music should be at about 10 dB down. Okay, again, unless it's kind of part of the scene, you're trying to create more energy, it varies. But a good starting point is 10 to 14 dB down. Similarly, with rear surround stuff, where do you want that to be? Anywhere from 10 to 24 dB down from dialogue, from stereo music, from left front, right front music. Almost 20 dB quieter in the rear. Because again, you don't need all that stuff happening back there. It's just, it's not going to create any more immersion. It's just going to create chaos, sonic chaos, especially if they're discreetly placed. So a duck of 18 is pretty significant here. Also, this music, because I already mixed, these were exported stems, so they're already kind of mixed at the level that kind of worked for them. This music is sort of quiet already, so minus 18 would be too much. I want to show you what happens. Let's make it like minus 6. Watch what happens to those keyframed dots when I let go. Did you see how now it's doing less ducking? Okay. And if we were to play this back, let's take a listen here.
Yeah, nothing like a nice day. Who's that guy over there? Well, he's doing bad things. We better go stop him. Just give me the Chaos Emeralds.
Okay. So you can see how it just, when there was no dialogue, that music kind of ramped back up and then it went back down. Now maybe this actually wasn't enough. Maybe we want to duck it even more. So let's try minus 12, okay? Let's see what this sounds like here.
Nice one. Now stay out of my face. Yoshi. This Chaos Emerald is mine, and you're gonna have to fight me for it if you want it. You hear me? Do ya? Yeah. Come on.
All right, and you can see it's staying ducked for the whole duration here. Now the other important setting is the fade setting here. So this is after it no longer detects dialogue talking, how long it takes, to go back to its regular level. So in this case, 800 milliseconds, that's 0.8 of a second. That's fairly long, but it's going to be smooth, all right? So something like this.
We got the Chaos Emerald, Tails. Yeah, we should leave now.
Okay, and you can see how right up here on this music, right when that dialogue came in, it ducked it back down again, all right? So you could have faded those in the same amount of time as the ducking analysis. Yes, now again though, there's lots of dialogue here. So all of these little bits, I mean, again, for most of this, it's pretty consistent. Look, hey, you're on the page with me, Mike. I probably would have enveloped this myself, but if you're not comfortable doing that and you just don't want to, this is a really fast and effective way to do it. All right, and it's great. And it works in stereo, 5:1 mono. Doesn't matter what kind of production you're working in. Auto ducking is pretty sweet. And we can just leave this. So this is the nice thing about this. I can leave this as it is, close this panel. We can always come back to it. Oh, and one more thing, actually, it's worth pointing out. Since Mike just mentioned that I could have manually drawn those too, as you make adjustments, Adobe Sensei keeps analyzing and readjusting. So again, if we were to say, make this, minus 25, now you can see very significant, right? Make it, what does it go to? Minus 48, even more, you won't even hear music at this point, right? Brings the music back up, and then way down.
We got the Chaos Emerald, Tails.
Yeah, at minus 48, we're not even hearing it anymore. My point is that as you adjust this slider, Sensei dynamically reconfigures and adjusts, okay? If you want to make your own manual changes, simply uncheck monitor clip changes right here, like this. And now what you'll see is you actually have access to the keyframes themselves. So you can specifically draw in and modify the volume curve of the music against the dialogue. Now here's the rub. Once you start tweaking this, let's say you get it exactly how you want, you're like, oh, you know what? I want to globally make everything a fade time of 500 milliseconds. Once you disable monitor clip changes, you're in manual mode. So if you turn this back on, now you're in Sensei mode, where it's not editable. The only editing you have is via the sliders, okay? So you have total control if you want it by unchecking that box. But if you want Adobe Sensei to do its job, leave it checked, okay? Yep, you can see the dialogue, detect it with your eye. A little snappy today, Mike, but yes, absolutely. But again, not everyone's gonna know, maybe they're looking for the pen tool. It's very easy to grab. This is a good example, like the pan, the pan envelope instead of the volume envelope, by the way, is yellow, pan is blue. I get it, it's confusing. And if you have a lot of dialogue and it's a long form piece, this is a great way to get started. And like I said, even if it doesn't do an awesome job everywhere, and sometimes it doesn't catch everything, it'll still retain all the things it did, and then you can go in and just tweak one or two spots that didn't work or it didn't detect properly. So it's really best of both worlds, okay? Nice. Hello, Segev Segal, nice to see you. Johnny TFK, sweet. Okay. All right, Matt Live, how are you doing? Okay. All right, so that was auto ducking. All right, let's go back to reverb effects in the surround speakers. And we're going to use music for that again. So, and let's just highlight this one since it's kind of a nice longer piece right here. Okay. So the music itself, I want the music to be front and center. Okay. And there's a little bit of it going into the rear speakers. You can actually see that right there. And again, I can just turn these off entirely. But what I want in the rear speakers primarily, and I'll leave it on because a little bit of bleed is okay. But what I actually want back there is just kind of the echo and ambience of that music. All right, so this is where we're going to go back into our mixer here, drag this track a little bit closer, and go into verb. So what you'll see here is on send number 2. So send number 1 is sending everything to the stereo mix. You've got 16 sends in Audition. Send number 2, I'm sending the dry signal of this music before the fader to this reverb bus, okay? And then again, this reverb bus is going to the stereo mix so that you can all hear it on stream, but it's also automatically, by default, going to the master output for 5.1, all right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the Studio Reverb here, and I'm going to start adjusting the volume level, how much we're sending to it, and you're going to start to hear some of that echo coming through. Take a listen. Now, because this is pre-fader, if I were to drop the fader of the music. Now, it's probably pretty quiet on stream. Yeah, it's super quiet. You'd have to turn up your headphones real loud. I'll increase it a little bit more. Okay, so you hear that? So now imagine you've got that in the rear. It's echoey, swashy, epic sounding stuff. But then you have this. Okay. So again, reverb signal discrete, dry signal discrete. That's just me going mad. Okay, so this is a really awesome way to send signal to the rear speakers very effectively, all right? And I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna place it discreetly back here, all right? And take it out of the center. So now we've just got that reverb reflecting in the rear speakers, okay? And you can see it on the dialog here too. All right. Default, this is where we've placed it. And again, even if I turn that fader off now, it's still back there, okay? And what's really nice about this is you can set up multiple, I recommend setting up multiple buses for ambient effects. You know, there's a lot of, again, this is there's this the epic fight scene here.
You wanna fight, huh?
All right. So even by just having a little bit of ambience, you know, almost like a slapback delay, not fully discrete in the rear, but somewhat in the rear and a little bit in the front speakers, it's going to give you just more space. And again, because some of these things have already been panned across the screen to kind of reflect, you know, a left to right punch or a right to left uppercut or whatever it is, you're going to feel those same spatial effects happen in the rear speakers. And again, it's not discrete placement, but it's just that ambience. So you're kind of feeling like the echoey delay, the decay of the grunts and everything, not with super long tails, reverb tails, I mean, but just enough to give it like it's in an environment, like it's not completely dry. So I usually have a couple of different reverb buses set up for different types of things. You know, footsteps, Foley, another good example. You know, if you've got like a track of like someone running or just standard like human Foley, so running, breathing, mouth sounds, you know, clicking, whatever, place it in kind of an ambient space slightly towards the rear. You don't want it echoey, you want it discrete, but it'll just give you this. It gives you depth, right? That's what I think make for some of the most enjoyable 5.1 surround mixes. If discrete is your thing, you can do that too. I showed you how. But when you give it some depth and space, it really begins to feel very immersive. And then and then you don't care. And then you're just like, wow, that was great. What great sound design, okay? So we've talked about busing to buses. We've talked about effects in the surround speakers. We've talked about auto ducking. We've talked about setting basic levels and position and placement in the 5.1 environment before you begin mixing it. Now let's talk about getting it out. And again, we're kind of going through this, but I wanted to kind of compartmentalize this into 3 specific sections. You know, setup, editing concepts, and then delivery, right? And this isn't necessarily final delivery, but it's a couple of ways that you will typically export a multi-channel mix. I'm gonna reopen Premiere for this. All right. What color track are the sound effects? They're all different colors. So again, on the original session, I believe they're all color coded the same. Yeah, I didn't even color them discreetly. Oh, that's right, because my little 8-year-old edited most of this. That's why. I always color code things discreetly by type. So yes, and what I would typically do, so they're all down here, Mallory, and they're kind of in, you can see multiple colors, but I unify the colors so that it's easier for me to understand what I'm working with. So yeah, I would go in here and make whatever that purple is, just redo it and make it this one. And I would color all of these the same, so that I know like everything that's that color is sound effects and dialogue. All the dialogue typically I'll do in like yellow, something like that. Yeah. Since we added all the color and music too here, so I'll just do like that magenta for music. There we go. Much nicer. And then here we'll make the video itself. Let's make that orange or green or that. No. There you go. No. Yes. Okay. All right. So yeah, it just makes things easier to see. I love color coding stuff. Yeah. It's really useful. It is cute, but it's really useful too. Okay. Exporting. So let's go ahead and go back to Premiere for a second. Let's open up. No, I don't want to save that. I think we'll be fine. I'll just reopen the session that I saved, and hopefully it works great. This was a converted project. I had to convert it from something else, and I'm wondering if it got corrupted. I hope not, but it may have. Okay. So here is the surround version in Premiere that was sent over right to Audition. So from Audition, I can go up to the multi-track menu and I can say export to Adobe Premiere Pro. All right, now I'm going to try this and we'll see. Now you can do one thing at a time here. So you can do stems, you can do session as 5.1. So let's do that first. So this would, actually let's do stems. How much time we have? 3 minutes. Let's try stems and see if that's going to work. Okay. So I'm going to place this stuff, just put it where it's supposed to go. All right, we're going to place it here. And we're going to do each track as a stem. Okay. Nah, let's just do interleaved. I think that's going to be easier. Okay. So what we're creating here is a 5.1 interleaved file. Okay, so this is going to be one wave that contains left front, center sub, left surround, right surround. Go ahead and click export. It's 48K, all right, and click export. Now at this point, again, I haven't done any like mastering to this or anything. I could if I wanted to. Now I actually have a track in here. Track 7 is where I wanted it to go. So let's put this in track 7. Notice track 7 is a 5.1 track, okay? We're now importing a 5.1 interleaved file, which, by the way, exported extremely quickly. It's got me a little nervous. Let's click OK. And if we scroll down, aha, there it is. And look at that right there. Sonic 5.1 Remix. Okay? So now, assuming everything was done correctly, and I've got everything else muted, and that's the only track that isn't, if we play this now...
Nothing like a nice day in Green Hills, huh, Tails? Yeah.
You heard the
like
duck?
A nice day. Who's that guy over there? Well, he's doing bad things.
Okay. Really simple. If we were to take this file, let's go ahead and edit this clip in Adobe Audition. I just want to show this to you. This is what an interleaved file looks like. It's a single wave file that has all of the various channels in it itself contained. And you can see they're even labeled along the right side here. So what this allows me to do, once I do the mix, now I can come in. Oh, notice I didn't send anything to the LFE, so my bad. Now I can come in and I can start to master and tweak this. And if I want to do individual treatments, like let's say I wanted to apply compression to just the center channel where all the dialogue is, and look, the center is very discrete. I can turn off all these other channels. I could highlight the dialogue in the center, and I can apply effects to that dialogue. So let's just say I'm just going to do this real quickly just to show you how it works. Let's grab a preset. I don't know what this is going to do. The voice thickener, okay? And notice it only affected the center. Here's before, all right? And then here's after. So we just compressed the center channel dialogue, okay? And if I were to save this, just save it, turn back all the other channels on, and go back to Premiere Pro, those changes are reflected here. So this allows me to do some final tweaking and mastering on the Audition side while that master's living in Premiere Pro, all right? You can even do things like global fades, fade-ins and fade-outs if you've got all the tracks on here. So maybe you didn't do a fade-out at the end, you didn't like how it sounded. You can use these destructive fade handles right here to do that. But again, this gives you total control over each individual element. And then you just continue your edit in Premiere, or of course you can export the whole thing directly from Audition via Media Encoder as well, when we're back in the multi-track here. Export via Media Encoder, all right? So my friends, that is all the time I have. Thank you so much for watching. You can always catch the replay. If you got any more questions, catch me on Twitter at Beetlejace. We've got the Illustrator Daily Creative Challenge coming up next, so stick around for that and have a great rest of your morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world. See you next time. Bye-bye.